Hi everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome to Mondays with Maja number
13.
Number 13. Number 13. Today we are talking about household division of labor. Household division of labor. We are talking about the chores and how perhaps unequal the household division of labor can be in Canadian households. So, what are we going to? Hello. Hi. Who is on? Okay, so what are we talking about? Anything I need to do firsthand?
YouTube videos are all up.
Oh, all the old Mondays with Maja are now officially up on YouTube. We finally figured it out, and it is up. There was a little bit of a delay, but they're all up there now, all 12 episodes. And what else? My next workshop is Sunday, June 9th, and that is a 3-hour workshop just on the imposter syndrome, where we're going to dig deep. It is at the Tribeca Cafe in downtown Oakville, and that is a really super lovely cafe in downtown Oakville, and it's a small room at the back, so maybe we'll be 10 of us, maybe 12 max in that room. And then we can just step out, grab our coffee, grab our pastry, go to the back, and then do our workshop. So that is Sunday, June 9th, and I think it's live on Eventbrite. If not, it'll be live at the end of tonight. Okay, so we know that we have more women working outside the home than ever before. But the work that they do inside the home hasn't really changed that much, unfortunately. Interestingly, we know that mothers that work outside the home have higher levels of self-esteem and are less depressed than full-time homemakers. But working moms are less satisfied in their marriages. Working moms are less satisfied in their marriages. And for any working mums in marriages, this is not a shocker for you. This is not a shocker. Why? Because our workload has increased. Not only are we working outside the home for pay, but we're also doing the majority of the housework inside the home. So while men, and for the majority of what I'm talking about today, I'm talking about men married to women in heterosexual relationships, but I will talk about what the research shows in gay relationships, because it shows that they are way more egalitarian in how they divide out household division of labor. But for men married to women, they benefit by having two incomes coming into the household, and they're still being provided with the same level of comfort. So let's break it down. So very briefly, women in Canada, and the data is pretty much the same for the States and in many countries in Europe, that we're working more and we're enjoying our home life less. So we, in general, women are reporting higher levels of stress. Stress seems to be Canadian women's number one health concern. And this can be attributed to what Arlie Hochschild, she's a sociologist, what she calls and what she terms the second shift. So once women are done working at work, right, for outside the home for pay, then they come home and they do their second shift, which is taking care of the kids and the household and the cooking and the cleaning and all of that, right? And that's their second shift. So if we're going to address that, we need both system level changes and individual changes. So on an individual level, we need, hello, from Jack Astor's. No way, are you watching from Jack Astor's, Elaine? That is funny. How are you even listening to me in a restaurant? Especially Jack Astor's, because they're super loud. Okay, so if you see me looking back and forth, it's because we're filming off two cameras, one for Instagram and one for YouTube. So if you notice me turning, that's why.
I didn't hit the play button for that one.
Oh, you didn't even hit the play button?
No, because it's on an angle, so we'll do it next week.
Oh, good thing you told me. Oh my gosh, I was talking to the second camera and this guy just tells me the second camera is not rolling. That's good. Thanks, Brownie. Okay, so some individual level changes. First, men need to want to do more housework. There sort of has to be like a base level of willingness to be a more full partner in the running of the household, in taking care of the kids, in taking care of the pets, in doing the laundry, in helping with grocery shopping, in helping with food prep, and helping with cleanup, right? All of that. Men's involvement will only be sustained through the supportive nature of their partners, of their friends, of their colleagues, but really also of their work environment, right? And they also need male friends who encourage them and expect them to help out more. And there's this great quote, and it says, "Unless fathers do a greater share of the work at home, mothers will remain disadvantaged in working outside the home. Mothers can't win unless fathers are willing to change." That's a quote by Andrew Cherlin. So let me talk to you about some of the cool studies that have come out regarding household division of labor. So sociologist Barbara Reisman, she did this longitudinal study on the career aspirations of high school junior and senior girls. And then she wrote a book about it, and the book was called Gender Vertigo. And she asked them whether they were going to be career women or stay-at-home moms. And then she asked them that same question 13 years later, and she found that half the girls that said they would be in the workforce were actually housewives. And almost as many of the girls who said that they would be homemakers were actually in the workforce. So it was all flipped over. So all of that to say that what we think we may want to be, or what we think we may want, is not what we end up getting when we enter into a formal union, whether you're cohabiting or you're married. So what we initially aspire to in a relationship may not be what we get in that relationship years later. Isn't that fascinating? So you can say right now, if you have high school girls, or if you're a high school girl yourself, or you're a university student right now and you're listening, you can say right now, when I get married, I am never getting into a relationship where my partner doesn't do 50% of the housework. And then you get into a relationship and you realize that you're doing 80% of the housework. And so that's what the data is showing, that what we say we will not tolerate in a union and what we say we want in a partner is not necessarily what we end up getting. So you can say that you would never do all the household chores, and you can say that you would never do all of the food prep and all of the childcare and all of the pet care. But then 10 years later, you do end up doing all of it. So what does that mean? It means that we need systems in place to ensure that we don't end up doing it all and doing what we don't want to do, and then resenting it years and years later, and then resenting our partners for it, right? And so this shows us that the strength of socialization is strong, and it's sometimes more overwhelming. This sounds like me and all my friends. I'm a junior in high school. Yeah, and so the question is, this is really great if you're listening to this now and you're in high school, is what are the conversations you're going to have with your partner? Because what we're finding out from the data is we aspire to all these things in our marriage and our partnerships later on, but then when we enter those partnerships, we don't end up having the important conversations around who is going to do what. Who is going to take care of the grocery shopping? Who's going to pick up the dry cleaning? And if you have kids, who will stay home, and why are you making that decision? And is it based purely on income? So another sociologist, this is like some depressing statistics for you, but another sociologist, her name is Kathleen Gerson, and she wrote a book called The Unfinished Revolution. And for her study, she asked men and women what type of relationship they want. And 80% of the women and 70% of the men said that they wanted flexible gender boundaries. So the men would do childcare sometimes, but sometimes they would help out at home, and the women would do both. So it was flexible, right? That they wanted to share the division of household labor. And they didn't want just the women to cook, because that's what women had done. And they didn't want just the men to work and bring home a paycheck, because that's what men had done in the past, right? They wanted it to be more fluid and flexible. But all of that sounds lovely on paper, right? Like, who doesn't want a partner that wants to share and help out and be flexible? But guess what? That's not how things worked out. Exactly like the first study, they found that she did a follow-up study, and she asked them, now what if your plan A couldn't work out? What if you couldn't have flexible boundaries around household chores and childcare? What would plan B be for you? And you know what the men and the women in that study said? 70% of the men said they would just revert back to traditional gender roles, like the way we had it in the 1950s. They would just revert back to that. And 75% of the women said they'd like a divorce. That's how strongly women did not want to get bogged down by these traditional gender divisions of labor, but yet that's how most Canadian marriages and cohabiting relationships end up being. Even when women say in a study, I'd rather divorce my spouse than do all of the cooking. I'd rather divorce my spouse than do all of the childcare. Fast forward 10 years, when they're in a relationship and they're in that marriage, they end up doing it all and they end up staying. So what is the problem? What is happening? So a Statistics Canada research survey in 2009 found that Canadian women on average spent 13.8 hours a week on household chores. 13.8 hours a week on household chores versus 8.3 hours for men. This is what we call the double burden. The double burden. So not only are women shouldering a disproportionate amount of work, realistically, what qualifies for a two-person job at home, right? Women are doing that. That then impacts their work and career aspirations, because then women miss out on work opportunities, on staying late after work to go out for dinner or to go out for networking opportunities or to attend business conferences, because they have a whole other job waiting for them when they get home. Who's going to pick up the kids from daycare? Who's going to be there for them to help them do their homework? Who's cooking them their meals? Who's giving the kids their bath? All of that. So in a 2015 study, so this is newer data, and this study, it's a time use survey study, and that's carried out every 5 years in Canada. And the data revealed that once again, we have very entrenched gender norms regarding unpaid work in the house. And women spent on average 3.6 hours a day. 3.6 hours a day doing unpaid household chores, while men did 2.4 hours a day. So basically, in a nutshell, all these studies are showing that women are performing about double. Women are performing about double. I can't read that. What does that say? Women are performing about double the amount of household labor in Canadian households. And we're doing 50% more chores, 50% more household management, food care prep, all of that, right? All of that. It's 2019, and we're still doing 50% more household labor, unpaid household labor, right? And I recognize that these problems are bigger than women. Like, women can't just fix these problems on our own. We need government changes. We need nationalized daycare so that we're not going bankrupt paying for preschool and daycare options, so that every woman who wants to work can go back to work and know that her child is being taken care of, right? We need employers, obviously, to provide us with more flexible work options. And we need work policies that favor families, that take into family considerations, that are more flexible. Studies have shown that men do want to help out more, and they want to take off time when their children are born, paternity, labor, and all that. And they want to stay home when their kids are sick, and they want to attend their kids' recital after work. But it's not received well at their place of work. They are not encouraged to take time off or to come in a little bit later so that they can drop their kids off at school. So these men don't feel as comfortable pushing for more flexible work options. And there's certain job sectors where it's definitely not as, it was more frowned upon, if you will. It's just more difficult. So all of this has a negative impact on women's health. An Australian study found that while women work fewer hours outside the home, right? So they'll work fewer hours at their job, at their doing paid work. When you consider all the unpaid labor that they do for childcare, food care, household pet care, and elder care, taking care of their elderly parents, they're working longer hours than men. So how sustainable, how realistic is this? And then what are the consequences for women's mental, physical, emotional health? Like, where do you keep getting all these extra hours? How are they sustainable? And the authors of this Australian study said that it amounts to 100 hours of extra labor per year that men can devote to their careers, which is why they are able to accelerate and move up and be promoted and do all those extra networking and get all those extra opportunities, because they are putting in 100 extra hours a year on their careers than women are, right? So they can lean in to their careers. They have that opportunity because they know there's somebody catching all the slack at home. There's somebody who is there to cook and clean and take care of the emotional but the emotional toil of taking care of the household and the kids, right? What else? So this obviously impacts women's health, and it leaves them with less time for themselves. It leaves them with less time for self-care, less time to exercise, less time to sleep, less time just to go out and grab a coffee with friends, less time just to rejuvenate for themselves, less decompressing, less me time. That just leaves them with less time for themselves. So, do you want to hear something even more depressing? Several studies have found that although women do more unpaid work than men before the arrival of children, women's unpaid labor goes up after kids. So we're already doing free, unpaid labor before we have kids, taking care of the household, making appointments, making sure all the family members get together, buying the gifts, remembering all the anniversaries, all that emotional labor we do already. And then once we have kids, all that unpaid emotional labor that we do just skyrockets. We end up doing more when the kids arrive, because when kids arrive, we're just doing more laundry, more cooking, more cleaning up. So it's kind of a depressing statistic. So what do we do? What do we do with this? What does this mean? What we have to do is sort of have these uncomfortable conversations with our partners and our spouses around, what are you going to do in the house and what seems fair to you? And I don't like cooking, so how about you handle cooking? Or I hate doing laundry, so why don't you do the laundry? Or we sort of have to have these uncomfortable conversations so that we lay it out right from the get-go. What are you going to do and what am I going to do? And what can we maybe, if we can afford it, outsource? Can we hire out somebody to do this for us? Can we buy takeout or eat out more, buy more prepared foods if we both don't like cooking, for instance? So what about same-sex couples? What do they do? What has the research found with same-sex couples and the household division of labor? Okay, so research shows that same-sex couples have a way more egalitarian distribution of household labor. So there is a greater level of negotiation involved with same-sex couples. They're not sort of as restricted to the stereotypical or socialized gendered norms. We have more research on what lesbian couples do, and so I'll just talk about that rather than what gay men are doing. So the studies that I'm going to refer to are referring mainly to lesbian families. So there was the most seminal research was done by researcher Dune, and they studied 37 lesbian mothers in the UK and looked at, or families, and looked at how they handled the household division of labor. And then they compared that to the general British public. And what she found in this study was that lesbian couples really, from the get-go, emphasized fairness and co-nurturing the child together overrode everything else in their families, meaning being fair to one another as partners and being fair to both of their careers was paramount. And they always talked about that, and they always debated that and analyzed that. So what was fascinating about this study in particular was that the lesbian couples each dropped their employment down to part-time, so that both of them were working part-time hours and they were both juggling motherhood at the same time, which is the exact opposite of what heterosexual couples do, where it's usually the guy who's the breadwinner. He keeps working, he's the one that makes more money, and the woman ends up staying home full-time for that first year and maybe even longer for the first few years. So these lesbian families in Britain from the get-go were like, no, we both want careers and we both want to mother, and so we're both going to drop down our employment to part-time status so that we can each take care of the kids and take care of the household at the same time. They didn't want to sacrifice their careers. And usually in heterosexual couples, it's the person who makes more money that ends up not quitting their job. And that usually is the guy in the relationship. Whereas for lesbian couples, it didn't matter who made more money. It didn't matter who was further ahead in their career. They both decided to drop down to part-time status so that both parents could equally share in the caregiving, not sacrifice their careers. That was kind of fascinating. So another interesting finding from the study was that the lesbian couples really emphasized caregiving over household labor. It was more important for them to spend quality time with the child rather than emphasizing a perfectly pristine, cleaned house. And this really contrasts with what the general public does in Britain, whereby women spend more time cooking and cleaning than childcare. So these couples, these lesbian couples in Britain, willingly reduce their labor down to part-time, which effectively meant they were reducing their income, right? And their material resources so that they could attain equality within their union and their family. That's amazing. That's amazing. I did not have that in my relationship. And so what we know is that so many women have been finding these breaking points where they are like every month or two finding themselves boiling over with rage and resentment because they're doing it all. They're doing all the household labor, and they feel like so much of their work goes unseen, right? And in order to figure out where I was in this, personally for me, I decided to do a time log. So I kept track of where all my hours were going. And I wrote them all down. Sleeping, showering, eating, childcare, food care, work, everything. And at the end of that, I realized that I was spending 14 hours a week cooking. 14 hours a week cooking. Hours and hours and hours on laundry. Hours on cleaning. And then childcare. And I was basically broken. Like it was not sustainable. It was so much labor. And that's when you need to have those, again, as I said, those uncomfortable moments where you sort of have like a crisis point where you're like, okay, this is unsustainable. I can't keep doing it. I'm stressed beyond belief. And it wasn't until I did the time log when I was just overwhelmed with stress that I realized this doesn't work anymore. This doesn't work for me. We have to have a more egalitarian division of labor. What else do I want to say? It's still astonishing to me that it's 2019. So many women are in the workforce, but yet so many of us still in North America are doing 50% more household labor. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, really, because all of that invisible labor is preventing us from leaning into other areas of our life, whether that's fitness, starting a new business, hobbies, self-care, our careers. And there's another component of that, and that's what we call invisible labor. And you'll know what this is. Invisible labor, that is the emotional labor that we do. And it only gets noticed when it doesn't get done. It's the cooking, the laundry, the pet care, the child care, the elder care, right? We're the cooks, the nutritionists, the event planners, the appointment makers, the chauffeurs, the book readers, the gift buyers, the birthday reminders. And what do a lot of men typically do in the household? They do the seasonal work, grass cutting, snow removal, car repairs. That's the work that if it doesn't get done today, it's not a big deal. If it doesn't get done tomorrow, it's not going to be a big deal. If you don't cut the grass for 2 weeks, it's still not going to be a big deal. Your lawn may look messy, the neighbors may be side-eyeing you, but your household is still going to be running. But if women stop doing the laundry, if women stop cooking, your household effectively stops, right? Your household stops. And the emotional labor of taking on the home, right? And then everybody else's needs within the home, of being the one who plans, who organizes everything, is exhausting. And it's invisible. And worst of all, it's assumed to be free. It's assumed to be free, but it ain't free, right? It ain't free. We know that it's not free. There are very real consequences for women's physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, financial health, all because of this emotional invisible labor. So again, you have to go back, you have to have a conversation about what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So you really, like, go home, have that talk. Or even if you're not in a relationship, have this talk with your friends, with your girlfriend. Say, hey, what do you want to do when you get into a partnership? What do you want to do when you get married, if you want to get married? What do you want to do when you have kids? Are you prepared to do 90%? Is that what you want? Is that what you're setting yourself up for? Well, if not, how are you going to set up your home and your relationship so that you are not the one that is consistently overburdened? Yeah. So what else do I want to say about this? I have a lot of notes. A lot of women, I think, fall into this mindset of thinking that we have to do it all. And that's the sort of people pleaser in us. And we think that we have to say yes. And everything that we do has to be perfect. And it has to be perfectly planned out. And it's sort of like the twin diseases of perfectionism and people pleasing. But we sort of can't fix everything. We can't be the solution to everyone else's problems. We can't always be the go-to person for everything, right? We can't always plan everything. We can't always do all the play dates. We can't do it all. And we have to start thinking about ourselves. We have to save ourselves sometimes. We have to have self-care. We have to have those moments for ourselves so that we are replenishing ourselves. If not, we will become resentful of our partners, and we could have lovely partners, but we could just be really resentful of the situation that we have created and found ourselves in. We could be resentful of the time that we're spending cleaning and cooking rather than spending quality time with our kids. We could just be resentful that we're doing all this invisible labor and nobody is noticing and nobody is appreciating it. So, I just want to bring your attention to that. That women still in 2019 are doing 50% more household labor than women. And it's kind of gotta stop. There was, I want you to read an article if you can. It was an article that went viral like a year and a half ago. Oh, it's called The Chores Do Us Part. The Chores Do Us Part. And it was in Modern Marriage. And it does a really great write-up of how unequal the household division of labor is. And it includes some sociological data in there. So read that if you can. So it's in Modern Marriage magazine. Yes, I know you appreciate your mother so much more now, I'm sure, because you realize how much work she's doing and how exhausting it is, and how maybe sometimes she would like a day off, or she would like to just walk around the block and not listen to anybody's problems or complaints, and she would just like to take care of herself and go to the gym or go have an overpriced Starbucks coffee. So this is a really great article, Till Chores Do Us Part. If you just Google that, you can read it. I have this article as part of my reading for my sociology course at MAC. This is one of the articles that they have to read when we discuss the household division of labor. And another one, it's a shorter article, and it's called Women Aren't Just Nags, We're Just Fed Up. And it's by Gemma Hartley. Okay, yes, I stayed home for the last 15 years and I am so ready to start living again. Hallelujah. Absolutely. Oh my goodness, you must be exhausted. Yes. Definitely. I am sure that you are ready to say, not my problem anymore, and that's not my issue, and you're old enough to do this, and you should figure this out on your own, because we need time to ourselves. We need to fill ourselves up. Absolutely. Overcoming the overburden is such a challenge. Thinking like a man helps so much. Would my husband feel guilty about getting housework done and his plans with friends? No, put yourself first. Oh my gosh. Yes. If I reframe everything, yeah, I know what you meant. Cancel plans with his friends. If I reframed everything and thought, would Steve vacuum the house before a play date came over? Would he do that? Would he scrub the floors just to make sure everything was beautiful before Ryo's playmates came over? That answer would be no, because he does not have perfectionist ideals for the house. And would Steve go to Indigo to find the most perfect birthday gift for this kid's birthday party, or would he just go the day of to Toys R Us and buy the first thing that he saw? Yes, because that is what he would do. He would go to Toys R Us and spend the minimal amount of time, whereas I will spend an inordinate amount of time making sure the house is beautiful and spotless before a play date comes, or spending way too much time creating the perfect gift for her friends and making sure it's wrapped and everything is perfect. And in the end, I'm the one that's exhausted and overburdened. So this article, Women Aren't Nags, We're Just Fed Up, by Gemma Hartley, this also went viral, and she ended up writing a book off of it called Fed Up. And it just came out. I haven't read it yet, but the whole book is about household division of labor and emotional labor. So this is another great article because it went viral because so many women felt connected and they resonated with this feeling of being fed up with doing it all, and having people in your household not even appreciate everything that you do, and feeling like we're just doing too much and we need to scale it back, but we don't know how. So both of them are great articles. If you have time, consider reading them. So I'm gonna call it a night. We've been going for 38 minutes now on household division of labor. Once I read Gemma Hartley's book, we'll have to do another one. I think of myself as the CEO of the home, or the household engineer. For sure, we're like ninjas in the house because we are like the organizational ninjas. We take care of it all, right? We do it all, absolutely. And there are a lot of skill sets that we pick up doing that, that we should absolutely be putting on our resume or be putting on our CV. Once we make our way back into the paid workforce. So if there aren't any questions, then I'm going to call it a night. We'll make it an early night. Let me just see if anybody has any questions. If not, my first husband did not help me at all, but my second husband helps me. He does the laundry, the ironing, and washing of the dishes. I let him do it because I'll do it once and then I'll be stuck in it. Absolutely, because that's how they get us. That is how they get us, right? And that's also because of these perfectionist ideas that we think our home has to be perfect, or we're the only ones that can do it perfectly. And you know how long I fell into that trap of, oh, I'll just do it. You know what? I'm better at this. I'm better at cleaning the kitchen. I do it faster. I know how to disinfect everything. And then I just end up doing it all. And he's sitting on the sofa watching Sportsnet, having a great evening. and I'm on the kitchen floor crying because I'm stressed out of my mind. So yes, I have been there. Really, it's only when I reached my breaking point and I finally had that conversation with Steve, and I was like, no, like, I'm done. This is it. Like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing a full-time job and coming home and doing full-time chores. I didn't sign up for this. And then we had to have like really uncomfortable, hard conversations about what we both want out of the marriage and out of parenting and out of the household. Yes. So anyways, I think we're done. So thank you everybody for joining us on Household Division of Labor. Some not surprising stats, kind of depressing, but not surprising, right? Because you all know women who are in this boat with us, who are still doing 50% more household labor, and it's got to change because it's unsustainable. So thank you everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Good night.